Chanakya, would you be commencing or you want me to start?
You can start. You can start.
Okay, all right. Hello, everyone. So, a very good morning to all of you, and I hope everyone is safe during these times. This particular session that we are going to have is on having a remote access to your environment and to your resources securely from anywhere that you are, enhancing remote working and making sure that we are running in a particular digital world secure enough to not have any of our resources or information compromised. My name is Ronak. I am a Microsoft Cloud Solutions Advisor, and I would be driving you through this particular session. And towards the end of the webinar, we can have a short 5-10 minutes of question and answer where we can make sure that some of your queries or your questions are addressed, and then later on, probably if required to have an in detailed discussion, we can probably connect post completion of the webinar over an email or over a call. When we talk about remote access today, guys, honestly, until 2020, none of us were aware that remote working could be so challenging, or remote working could have so much of significance, or it might probably become the new normal, as we say, while trying to work from anywhere, everywhere that we are. Of course, it was predicted that uh, managing work remotely is something which is going to be the next generation future, but we never assumed it to come at such a short notice, wherein making the environment stable and secure also started becoming a major challenge. Keeping all of these in mind, since we are already in a cloud driven world today where nearly 80 to 90% of our workloads are running uh, on premise, but still we are transitioning it to the cloud, and by every passing day, by every passing hour, cloud is having something new to introduce and something exciting to offer, which actually tempts us to move towards, or to speed up our journey towards cloud. While all of this is happening, it is remote access and remote working which is uh, becoming the most significant component of the R. Keeping all of this in mind, Microsoft introduced something which is called as your virtual desktop environment. Earlier, which was offered in collaboration with Citrix, now Microsoft has its own offering to to cater as a part of the solution that you might be having in your environment, or as a part of the bundle that you might have picked up, may that be in M365 or Azure, or however you have the cloud services procured. Today, when we are actually talking about the remote working, it is something which is more critical because of several reasons. I don't know where my user is sitting. I don't know where my user is connected. I don't know what kind of a network is he connected to. I can barely identify the security of that particular user's device. And still, by all means, I am forced to give him complete access to my corporate resources, to my corporate environment, in order to make sure that probably my work is served, my productivity is met, my user, I have the complete input or whatever is required from the user at a given point in time, and a lot of it more. I don't know where my users are going to use their emails from. I don't know probably whether the user is even sitting in the same region or not, and a lot more concerns. Now, in such a situation, I probably might think of having a VPN based setup wherein I ask my user to all the time connect to the corporate network and then try accessing the resources, which is something I would say not really practical, or rather, let me frame it that it is not necessary that every organization has their enterprise on-premise infrastructure designed in such a way that it is capable of serving the entire workforce from a remote location or from outside the office. That is where cloud steps in. That is where the virtualization and the remote access to the resource steps in from Microsoft Azure. Remote working is something which is typically going to include a lot of things. So when I say remote working, there are probably a thousand of questions that are hitting up your mind. When I say thousands of questions, what I mean over here is you probably are trying to figure out what all can I access from home. Can I get the same user experience while accessing those resources from home? Will my applications be able to function that well? The resource, the device, the laptop or the desktop that I'm using from home is not capable of serving the requirement of my organization. Probably, is this remote session going to help me scale up the hardware so high, and a lot more stuff. So, while answering all of these, we will also have a particular solution which has to be cost effective. Reason being, let's say even if the cloud has got to offer a solution like this, it is a very important question whether it is going to fit my IT budgets or not. Whether am I enabling it for the right workforce or not? Whether am I implementing it for the right type of employees or not, etc. So probably when we talk about giving remote access to all my users, I would want to typically categorize my workforce into four different verticals. The first one would be where I want to implement security and regulation in organizations which are probably government affiliations, government organizations which are healthcare or medical industry, financial services, investment companies, stock companies, and a lot more. I might have an elastic workforce. When I say an elastic workforce, I'm talking about people who are engaged on projects for a particular point in time. I might need to give them also an access. People who do not belong to my company but are engaging themselves in a lot of activities that are done inside the company. They are working as external vendors or contractors. I might have external auditors. I might have organization collaborations, mergers, and acquisitions. When we talk about these terminologies in serving from the perspective of serving these users with a powerful IT workplace, what I want to mention over here is that it might be a real nightmare to understand that where exactly is my data flowing, how am I going to control it, and how is it going to typically make sure that my data is not compromised or my security is not compromised. You might want to give access to your users of different categories. There might be users who are using their own devices, accessing mails over your mobile, corporate emails over your mobile handsets is it's a pretty common thing today. I would probably say that it is a default thing today. You might have a high level of restriction expected on your employees in the call center on the backend office. And you would at the same time also want to control the users at the branch office. Also, you might want to deploy specialized workloads for different categories of employees. As I said, probably I have some users in my company who are working on heavy applications like maybe AutoCAD or Corel, or maybe they are working on things like Photoshop. They are working on some high-end graphic and animation services and stuff, some studio components. In that case, if they are working from home, I cannot expect them to probably have a really high-end compute which is going to serve their purpose. I cannot expect to deploy a Photoshop or a Corel based corporate license on those end user devices. nor is it possible for me to give an end user device a hefty machine, maybe which is going to cost me an odd $1,500, $2,000 per user. So in that case, what should be the approach? What should be the apt method to serve all my components that are being mentioned over here? The answer to that is working remotely and implementing the component called as Windows Virtual Desktop. What is Windows Virtual Desktop? It's a massive platform with a very high scalability, I can say, which can, for the first time ever, make Windows 10 available with multiple sessions, multiple RDP sessions, like one single Windows 10 machine with Office 365 installed, and multiple users can take an RDP of the same and work over it. It can be protected using your Microsoft 365 Enterprise Mobility and Security suite. You can have all sorts of device and application management components deployed to make sure that the operating system is controlled. It is enabled and optimized for using Office 365 Pro Plus Edition, which is something the topmost that you have for Microsoft Office 365 or Microsoft Office suite, I can say. You can have access to all your third party applications, line of business applications. You can have access to every single probably resource or the network share that is configured in your organization. Yet you don't need to be a part, or you need not sit in your office itself to access all of these. This is all which can be served from home. So when I talk about the solution, I can say that you will have a complete solution designed and deployed, which is going to be a part of your local Active Directory. Whether or not to give a public IP based access is up to you. If not public IP, then you might require a VPN, maybe on the Fortinet firewall, or maybe Cisco AnyConnect or a Global Protect or anything. A point end user based VPN solution in place. Your this particular uh, VM instance or these pools of instances, and one instance will be allocated to the user as if he is working on a particular desktop from inside his organization. This is going to give him a feel as if he's working on his own corporate resource and not on a personal device. Highly scalable, totally versatile, can be a member of Microsoft Active Directory, heavily discounted in terms of cost when it comes to Microsoft 365 suite because licenses are included as a part of that particular suite. Typically optimized and enhanced for remote working, can be secured in any possible manner that I want to, and yet serving the purpose of remote working is something what Windows Virtual Desktop can be described at. We previously on our native on-premise environment had something called as the RD session host or my TS web solution, which is in today's date also widely used across enterprises to serve the applications in the organization. This particular RD session host had a couple of components to be in place, like it was a multi-session based solution on the Windows environment. It could support Office Perpetual and Professional Plus, and the updates were also managed long term, meaning you did not have those frequent changes that came up on this particular server RD component. At the same time, you have an end user device which is deployed with a Windows 10 operating system, which is always going to be a single session based, and it will support only Office 365 Professional Plus and no support for Perpetual. You now have a Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session version in place, which is actually a Windows 10 end user device, or which is actually a Windows 10 end user based operating system, but with the features of your RD session host. So you can have multiple sessions in place. You can have all your Office Professional Plus components in place. The updates will be managed by Microsoft, and still the user can seamlessly take an access and work over it. Absolutely beautiful when it comes to accessing those resources, because you don't actually feel the difference. You don't come to know that you are accessing things over a WVD session. It's just beyond. You don't need to have any specific server based backend in place managed by you, because that will be managed by the cloud. Blending the security of the convergence of the Microsoft ecosystem. As I said, Windows Virtual Desktop is extremely versatile. There is nothing specific that is missing out over here when it comes to having this particular solution implemented and secured. Why I'm mentioning this over here is you can have this particular suite control using your conditional access, your multi-factor authentication, and role-based access control in place. It can be controlled using the actual hundreds of compliance offerings that are given by Azure, because the VMs will be running in Azure but will be controlled by M365. Simply amazing. So you will have compliance policies, security settings, management, monitoring, diagnostics, all of it in place, which is being served by Azure, M365 controlling it, and Windows Virtual Desktop at the end is something which will be offering the applications the way you want to have them, getting authenticated with the Azure AD authentication methods, the modern authentication methods. So typically speaking, it is a suite which actually brings the entire experience of the user together. The best part of this is that I probably today might think of working on maybe an iPad or maybe a tablet device. I probably might think of working on a laptop, anywhere. It just does not require me to have a high performance compute. Have all of these implemented all together as a part of your enterprise organization, like the way you have a native data center. Assume this to be your cloud data center. Just hit a particular endpoint and you're good to go. Start working in your corporate environment. Once done, close it, release it. All your information is saved, secured, and nothing comes on your personal device. So typically it will keep your personal device completely sanitized from all your corporate workloads, at the same time giving you a full-fledged access to every resource within your organization. May that be applications, may that be data, may that be security policies, may that be device or application management, anything. And at the same time, making it extremely simple for the administrators to monitor, manage, and take an action on any kind of a security breach or a vulnerability right from a single dashboard, from a single point of control, where you see the events for all of these together. The whole idea of Windows Virtual Desktop was earlier generally available in a lot of regions, and now there are a lot of new regions which have also come in the being. UAE is also one of them, because Microsoft has very aggressively started deploying those services in major regions. So today I would say that if we look from the Microsoft's resource availability perspective, more than 70 to 80% of the regions on your Azure data center list are already matured and good enough to run Windows Virtual Desktop. The complete invention of Windows Virtual Desktop kept in mind just three major factors. One was the cost factor, because we cannot deny the fact that running a TS Web RDS component in my on-premise is something which is costing me a big chunk when it comes to licensing. At the same time, I do not even get that high level of resource availability the way it is expected by shedding that much of my pocket. Also, there were a lot of enhancements that the on-prem TS Web required, because it was pretty native, simply working on a single protocol that was an RDP based protocol. And lastly, there were some security concerns that the organizations always had while trying to give the access of these remote sessions to the users from outside their organization. With Windows Virtual Desktop, not anymore. The cost has been reduced. Security has become the primary focus. Everything is being offered securely within the environment. You have your new use cases. So when I say new use cases over here, it means that using Windows Virtual Desktop, you can create, optimize, and allow users to connect based on their requirements. Like we can have workloads for different set of employees, for different categories of employees, and those particular use cases will always be considered over here, keeping in mind that if it is a graphic intensive unit, then the cost will be accordingly. If it is for a merely salesperson, my cost incurred would be accordingly. And the deployment of a Windows Virtual Desktop has minimized the cost to nearly one third what you might be paying in your on-premise environment, yet managing everything on your own. Whereas over here, 90% of the baseline remains completely managed and controlled by Microsoft. Windows Virtual Desktop is offered by default as a part of several suites that you might already be having or you might be running within your environment. A few, or rather, I would say majority of them are the Microsoft 365 suites. And apart from that, there are certain server components. So if you have RDS licenses and stuff, you can definitely scale those Azure licenses. You can definitely scale those RDS licenses in Azure using the Azure Hybrid Benefit Fundamental, which is going to again bring down the cost much lower than what we might predict it to be. For each workload or for each user that will try to connect to the Windows Virtual Desktop, it is really amazing to know that a new workload will be spun up or there will be an attempt made to probably give the access to the user from the existing workload itself, depending upon what you define at the time of configuring and setting this particular thing up. This particular setup makes sure that you remain highly cost optimized and at the same time the user experience is not compromised. As I said, the most amazing part over here is that the management does not come under your control. Majority of it is something which is going to be managed by Microsoft. So again, when I say the compute, storage, and networking is something which is totally going to be taken care of by Microsoft, you cannot have any control over it. When it comes to the subscription or the actual platform, I would say, where you would go and set all of these up, majority of the options will be given to you or catered to you as a showcase over there while you're trying to deploy it. It is ultimately going to be your choice as to what you want to deploy. So you are just controlling what you want, not actually how that should function. And also, when we again go to the complete backend, like the security, the high availability, the downtime, the SLAs, everything is going to be totally managed by Microsoft. So it is very little that you will have under your control, or even the end user will try to control over here. So I can say that probably you just select the operating system, you select the version and the edition of the operating system, the version and the edition of the applications that you want to deploy, the Active Directory environment, and the IP address, probably the network where you want to place it. That's it. And the credentials to connect it to that particular environment. You're good to go. Nothing more than this is going to be under your control. So it's something which can be deployed probably in a few hours. It's not something which is going to be really complex. If it is about a test environment, then probably this is something which can be set up, I could say, in maybe a few minutes or maybe even an hour. It's that simple. It is the best virtualized Windows experience ever in the history of Microsoft. So whatever is being offered on WVD is something which was like never before. The cost is like never before. The security, the management and mobility is again like never before. Accessibility from anywhere, again, just requires your home network to have a little decent bandwidth. And the best part, from any device, not limited only to Windows, this is now accessible even on your Android, on your iOS, on your iPad OS, on your Mac, anything that you would think of working on. So you have Windows 10 and Windows 7, you have browser-based accessibility from HTML5, you have applications in Android, You have Mac OS or iOS based accessibility as well. Support for thin clients, the typical fundamental of dumb terminals, and setting it up as a component to be accessed, right, over terminals which are typically going to be just having something pushed from a server in the network. So yes, it does support Windows 10 IoT and Linux SDK Ubuntu as the thin client versions wherein you would want to have those components deployed as well. Client features, you think of the component that you would want to implement and they are all available by default over here. Microsoft Teams support, the one which is coming soon, has already been pushed up in a few further beta versions, and very soon we can expect a general availability of the same to come in place. Subset of monitors, that is having multiple monitors and stuff connected to WDS, again in terms of stabilizing the experience of the end user as good as he might be working on his own device, is also something which is coming as an add-on. You have a dynamic resolution fundamental. So when I say dynamic resolution, let's say you are working on a desktop, probably your screen might look like this. And when you probably try to restore the windows, it might automatically fit out to the window size that you are using. It's auto scalable. There is nothing manually that we need to do. It's that easy. You can have displays defined for a particular session that you have logged in into. So number of displays that you want to have in place who are going to actually have these applications opened, if at all you are sitting with a multiple monitor based setup or something of that sort. That is something which you can also achieve over here. Teams support, as I said, it is getting available with WVD. So when I say that Teams support is getting available, doesn't mean that every Windows virtual desktop session needs a Teams installation to be in place. What I mean to say over here is that Teams will be directly offered from the cloud platform, wherein the users can just connect to their host machines and start their meetings, start their communication, connectivity to their physical hardware devices, and a lot more. A short illustration that exactly it will give you the same experience of accessing Teams on an audio video interaction on a unified messaging platform the way it might be on your physical hardware or on your physical device. Meaning, it has got the capacity, it has got the capability to have a remote session and get that particular remote session embedded and integrated in on your machine in such a way that it will be able to pick up the hardware IDs of your devices that are connected locally, and then you take an access to all of them. When it comes to this kind of an access, it might be like, okay, it can be as secure as we might think of by having all the best practices and all of the components put in place. But the question over here is, while I'm accessing it remotely, how good is the user experience going to remain? So let's have a look at this. The one that we see on the left is something which was the early release or the beta release of WVD, and the one that you see on your right is something which is in the current release on the ones which are being available to the users right now if they go ahead with the deployment. So the frames per second have been increased to nearly 4 times to make the experience so smooth and realistic that it does not compromise at any cost. It has got options for multimedia playback. Again, something really fantastic to know, because when I say that I can use Windows Virtual Desktop securely to serve my intensive units that are required, when I say that we can use it securely to give access to the users who are actually demanding some high performance computes, in that case, how would that work when I'm working with some multimedia components? How would it serve me? How would it look like while I'm working with those multimedia components? Again, this is something which was earlier in the beta versions of what we say the WVD was being announced. And here I used to have my Windows components or my multimedia services utilizing nearly 30 to 40% of my memory hardware that used to be available on the physical device, which has now been optimized and enhanced with a lot of components integrated in the backend. And the experience that you get now is this, the enhanced version. What happens in the enhanced version? The component will hardly utilize nearly 2 or 3% of your processing on that physical device, and the rest of it, the number of frames, the actual media redirections that have been integrated, is going to give you a feel as if you are accessing those resources locally, bringing down your CPU utilization to probably something which is going to be really less than what you could ever assume a remote session to give you. While we deploy all of this in place, we can, as I said, also control them using any enterprise mobility and security component that is available as a part of the Microsoft 365 suite. If you say that you want to have an integration with the on-premise Active Directory, yes, this is possible. If you want to control the WVD instances using group policies, yes, it is possible. If you want to control these components using your any other native third party antivirus or anti malware suite or something, yes, it is possible. Guys, this particular session is like, out of your environment, you're just pulling out a particular window and giving the user to work on. Once he's done, you're pulling it back. Apart from that, it is as good as a local computer. It's going to function as if you are working on a physical computer in your home or wherever you are sitting. So probably if I want to access corporate resources, as I said, I don't need to do anything on my personal device. It can just remain vanilla. I can simply have an endpoint, connect, work. Once done, disconnect. I'm all good to go over a completely secured environment. No VPN needed, nothing at all. Everything will be controlled in the backend by my cloud provider, by Azure, by Microsoft 365, and the enterprise security options that you have around the entire suite. When you have some kind of a solution like this that you might have to offer, that you might need to offer to your end customers or to any organization, or to wherein this particular Windows Virtual Desktop or secure remote access becomes really essential uh, to be understood by the customer, there can be just simple ways to start off with it. You can primarily start off by just asking a few questions like, who are the users, where are they accessing the resources from, what all are the types of resources that they are accessing, at the same time, what all services or components are they using while they are accessing those resources remotely, and not to forget the most important question, how much are they spending out of their pocket to serve the solution. The next question can be, what conditions are required to access those corporate resources? Like, what all do I want to do? What all or where all are my users going to access these resources from? What is the nature of those service resources? Are they sensitive documents or are they merely applications? What exactly is the user trying to use? And what controls are required based on the conditions that the end customer defines? These questions can probably form the baseline of serving the solution to the end customers. This can become the baseline for the customers to understand the functionality of WVD, and that's how we can define the complete solution for them, have them access their resources as securely as they might think of while accessing them remotely. This particular thing, guys, was a short summary from my end on how remote working or remote access can be taken care of securely in my environment or probably from outside my organization. Based on this, I would now request if there are any specific questions that you guys wish to get answered. Right, guys? Thank you. Thank you so much for being a part of the session.